Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. My guests today are Lloyd Rushton-Jones from Denodo and Blake Griffin from Digital Modus. We're going to be exploring data, big topic, but specifically the data journey and how interoperability and integration are growing within government. What do organisations need to do? How do they need to rethink their approach? What technology do they need to use? What cultural changes do they need to make in mindsets to make the most of the integration piece? It's a big topic with lots of aspects and angles, and Lloyd and Blake shared multiple examples of how it can be made to work more effectively during the conversation. Loads to get into, so let's jump into that conversation right now. So Blake and Lloyd, welcome to the Government Transformation Show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Really looking forward to this exploration of data in the public sector. Good to have you with us, but let's start at the beginning. Perhaps we could start with some intros, who you are, what your kind of role is, how you're working with the public sector, just to set the scene a bit. So Blake, welcome. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you're helping public sector at the moment.
Hi, it's great to be here. And, first of all, I'd like to thank the Government Show for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts around how, disruptive data technologies can solve a number of the challenges we often see in government, especially around data management, data integration and data interoperability. I'm Blake. I'm from Digital Modus and I lead our strategy and delivery practice. We work a lot with government. And I've been working closely on a number of innovative and disruptive government projects over the last 10 years. Everything from London 2012, DVLA, GDS, student loans, Department of Transport, and a number of others. And most recently, I helped, establish Digital Modus and partnered with Denodo, one of our key partners and innovators in the data space, to share these new ways of working across government.
You mean encourage some of the dangerous minds in the data industry, I think. Hi, I'm Lloyd Rushton-Jones. I've worked a similar time to Blake in the public sector and with some fairly large software vendors. And more recently, I joined Denodo. It's a 20-odd year startup with some really wicked data management, which hopefully we'll touch on. There's some great examples already at play in some fast-thinking departments and agencies.
Good. Looking forward to jumping into that. Those wicked problems that we're all keeping us up at night. Let's start to unpack some of those. All for that. And you mentioned, Blake, the thorny issue of interoperability and integration, or a golden opportunity depending on your mood at the time. So you're going to be hosting the discussion table at the upcoming Government Data Summit around interoperability and integration. So I guess first question is, why that topic? Why does that matter to Digital Modus and Denodo? What are you doing in that space that you feel like you can add value and help organizations to crack that nut?
Yeah, no, both us and Denodo are very, very interested in the journey of data disruption in UK government. Integration and interoperability are two of the key issues that we see, getting access to the data, being able to consume it and to be able to use it. If you can't use the data that you have, then there's not really much point of having it there. And I think, Lloyd, from a Denodo perspective, I think you guys feel pretty much so the same, don't you?
Yeah, and I think that's the big reason why I joined Denodo, is that it's really amazing to see some of the customers, how quickly they get the value from their data. So, we've got worldwide customers, but even in UK government, if I take the inland revenue as an example, they were able to, and we'll delve into this a bit more, but they were able to get value from their data in under 3 months. I mean, that's extraordinary. When some of these data transformation projects sort of take 5-6 years.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I mean, the idea of anything happening in 3 months in government's pretty impressive. So the fact that you can do something with sort of a level of sort of technical complexity is powerful stuff. So let's kind of run the rule a bit over kind of current capability, execution around this interoperability piece, because there is massive amounts of data in government, and there's this historic perception of silos and agencies not communicating and on-prem pots of data that can't possibly integrate externally and all that kind of stuff. But I'm wondering where we're at now, actually. Have we moved on? Have we made a lot of progress in that space? So what are your kind of takes on that interoperability integration piece right now? Are we making progress?
Yeah, and I think we've made a lot of progress. But I think, going back to a bit of some history there from when I suppose myself and Lloyd first started, and understanding how data management can be disrupted and is being disrupted in the industry now. I can draw parallels, I suppose, and I think Lloyd as well, since we're both of a certain age, from when we were working in government, and we were also, very keen listeners of music and, collecting music during the age of the compact disc or CD, which was a very special time after records. We're not going to go into records because they're a bit of a different thing. But, I think, Lloyd, you even had some
mini discs. Yeah, I had a mini disc player, and I used to, and yeah. Anyway.
Every now and again, you bet on the wrong technology, don't you?
You do.
How's your Blu-ray collection as well? I guess
Yeah.
Picking the winners every time.
Yeah, and the thing is that this was all before the age of cloud-based music subscription services like Spotify, Apple Music, and Deezer and that. And one of the things that we often talk about is how much a lot of the digital world has changed, and music especially, and how accessible music is now, and how much the way we personally manage and consume our music has changed. But our methods of managing our data in our organizations has only really changed incrementally, and in many ways hasn't changed or been radically disrupted over the last 25 years.
Yeah, and I think what we were seeing is that departments were doing what we were doing back then. We're just moving the data from one place to another, from one data warehouse to another type of warehouse or swamp. So we're just kind of continually moving this data, which is a 90s type thing, isn't it, Blake?
Yeah, and if you look at it sort of back then as well, CDs were your primary music delivery technology, just like sort of the data warehousing and data lakes and that is now. And your songs and your CDs that you collected were like data in your data warehouses. They were physical things. You had to buy a CD, take it home, and you couldn't listen to a song until you bought it. And in many ways, you had to buy a whole album worth of songs, even if you didn't listen to half of them. And it's a bit like having to do an extract transform and then load it from one of your systems into a data warehouse or data lake.
Yeah, nice ETL.
Yeah, and it's that physical thing where you have to extract it and buy it from the shop. You have to take it home, and then you have to put it inside your collection and actually add it to your CD player. You couldn't just consume it, and I think as well, if you want, to draw that analogy further, we had scalability issues. You started off having a single rack of CDs, you only had 20, 25 CDs. You could find the CD that you wanted. They were in their own cases, and it was all organized, and it was easy,
And is that, I guess that's just like a data warehouse or a data lake.
Yeah, right? a really small one.
Yeah.
So this presumably makes chief data officers DJs, right? I'm taking this analogy to the right place. They're deciding what to play, what goes together, how you join up, how you mix it. I think I'll break that metaphor if I take it any further. So I'll let you carry on. So where do we? Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, no. So like data warehouses, the data warehouse sort of concept was sort of formed during the 1990s. To centralize data, to copy data into it, so people could use it and consume it without having to, impact the operational systems. And very much, that whole extract, transform, and load, whether it's a data lake or a data warehouse or some other form of new data terminology that they go and create these days, it hasn't really changed a lot since the 1990s.
Yeah. The ETL, like buying a CD or taking it home and burning the CD as the extract, transform, load. Yeah,
and I think as well is that these days, just like the amount of music has increased, we've increased significantly the amount of data that is needed within an organization, and the different types of formats that we, data that we have, and the requirement to visualize and consume that data.
Yeah.
The changes in the last 25, 20 years, or even 10 years since cloud has come in there to enable a lot more data to be collected has been very, very significant. And, then in a similar way to creating those shelves of data we talked about, we then started, forming these data lakes, which were, generally an unorganized or an unstructured set of data of various different formats. And, with the data lakes, and there was, they were there to take care of big data. And, as I said, they were unstructured, which is much like, often my CD and DVD collection was like. And I think, coming back to a couple of government examples and how I think working with the logical platform like Denodo has helped as well, is that for one of our government clients, we had to go and integrate with some open government data sources. And we were able to bring that into the data warehouse in our data model in under half an hour for 2 or 3 data sources, which if you are having a traditional data warehousing model to go and extract that data, load it up, and organize how that data went into that data warehouse or data lake, you'd be talking days and weeks, and for some organizations, depending on their governance, months to be able to do that. Whereas we were able to bring that in because we weren't extracting and loading up the data. We were connecting to the data at source within, hours and less than an hour to go and do that. So it really shows the difference in the way that you can manage your data.
So that's a really good take on, I suppose, the art of the possible, what's changing, how to sort of start to rethink the fundamentals around how you approach data, the technology that then follows through that. So I suppose interested in understanding a bit more about what good looks like now. Can you give us some examples of where you're seeing some of this new approach, both in terms of mindset, technology, that consumerization of thinking playing out in government? I'd love to hear some examples where you think it's actually getting traction and working well.
Yeah, so we've got a few, and Blake's touched on ONS, maybe you'll sort of touch on a bit more, but I mentioned Hmrc at the beginning. So Hmrc, they, about 4 years ago, they set out on this journey, and I said in 2020 they had a project that was a failing project, whether they had recognized that or not. But over 5 years they were trying to, basically they had a project 13 into one, 13 data warehouses into one, and for 5 years it failed to deliver. I mean, ultimately, if you're moving data, one of the key questions you've got to ask yourself is, when will I have all the data in one place? And if you're realistic, you'll realize you'll never have all the data in one place. And so what they found is that they needed, in a sense, a librarian to the data. And that's what they did. So they went to the market, they realized the concept of data virtualization assisted this kind of librarian view of the data, and they deployed within the engineering team. They deployed Denodo to manage that, and they deployed it within within the 3 months. Basically then you're then trying to drive more value from that platform. So, things like EU exit, anything else that the Inland Revenue is trying to do around big data and analytics, for example, maybe SAP workloads and so forth. So you can then, kind of organically grow it once you've got that concept. And then more recently, DWP, again, the kind of formation of these principles takes a little while, but they kind of latched on from a Gartner conference back in 2019 to the whole data mesh philosophy. And so then more recently, they focused on the restart scheme, which is about trying to get the 6 or so million people that are long-term out of work due to COVID. And so then it's trying to draw that data that for those out of work people with charities, with other organizations that help them get back into work. And I think as Blake sort of mentioned, I don't know if you want to mention anything else around ONS, but, Blake at Digital Modus worked really well with us on the ONS opportunity there.
Yeah, and ONS was great. What we were able to do there is link data logically across the departments. To get insight for the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office for that matter, which were otherwise unknown. But, there was more than that to this piece of work. We work very closely with the ONS around their integrated data service platform, which feeds data from various departments, in order to try and find, not just answers, but insight into key questions around health, the wealth and the security of people living in the UK, including financial stability. And this included, departmental data, open UK Gov data, amongst other things there. And it was really essential to have accurate data, which was very accessible because it wasn't just accessible to the people inside of ONS, but it was accessible to people outside of ONS who had to go and discover that data. And it really had to be easy to consume. So they can make sort of impactful decisions, based on their near and real-time evidence that they could get out of the data. And I think one of the things that we've all learned from our COVID experience is that old data doesn't really help. A lot of data is in there far too long. The latency around that data is, far too long. And then the environment and the world has changed in that time. There was no point really in getting COVID stats from a week ago. Everybody wanted to know how it was going today because it changed so quickly.
Yeah, and Nhs Scotland is probably one of our longest term public sector examples. They started with an oncology kind of diagnosis to outcome for the patient, a holistic view of the patient, which in Scotland with devolved government was far easier to kind of pull some of that data in. It was very outcome focused. And I think that the beauty of the way that they had orchestrated the data meant that they could quickly adapt it to COVID initiatives, and actually look at not just the kind of test and protect type of schemes, but also around the oxygen demand. Where were patients, what areas, how quickly could you get oxygen to them? That's really important. But some of also the social care programs. So they were able to, government is, particularly at the moment, is very keen to make sure that they prioritize investment for the right outcome. But are they able to measure that? Can they say, yes, we invested in there and actually, we know that investment paid off? With Nhs Scotland, they were actually advising the First Minister and actually highlighting that this investment wasn't a good one. And actually this one was, and therefore you can, so that's, really from a government point of view, that's a real key win, where to invest your money based on, access to data.
Yeah. And so I suppose the logic is there, the technology can support it, but as so often, it's a case of getting started. As you've said, it is a kind of disruptive journey of sorts. You know, it involves changing status quo, changing mindset, maybe changing technology, and so on. So where would you suggest organizations kind of start this journey, so that they get underway, but then they actually start to make real traction and start to deliver results and deliver that value?
Yeah, and I think one is starting to think about managing that data logically. You know, not thinking about where do I move my data from and to. You know, how can I make it easier where there's more complexity and an increasingly large volumes of data, and then how can a logical approach to this make my management simpler? You know, what we've seen in the examples is that if you use a logical approach and logical software to do that, your data, you know, your source data stays where it should be, is at the source. And so that takes a significant amount of effort and cost out of delivering your data warehouse or your data lake or your data insights. And also to then start thinking about how do I create logical views, you know, including things like how do I protect my data from a security perspective, you know, so people can't see the data that I don't want them to see. How do I do data masking? How do I limit in those views that the audience for each of those views only sees what they want? And then how can I then share and use those views and that real-time access and to both those views and the data to produce those iterative and agile data analysis, and, you know, support things like the data science processes, because that mindset of change of being real time and wanting things now is really important, rather than always thinking that I'm always going to get it in 3 months' time, or I can only get this in 6 months' time.
Yeah, and you know, there's got to be a reason why people change. You know, so if we look at why Spotify and all the rest is working, is because there's a real need for access to music. So in government, and you know, we've seen great examples where there has been change Hmrc, where there's change and it happens within 3 months. Equally, there's a number of departments out there that are continually moving that data, and you know, there's no problem with moving the data. But actually, why wouldn't you create this abstraction layer between the two, so you can carry on moving your data? And you know, like we said about the music, I don't care where the music comes from as long as I get the music. So you know, and this is the real benefit of data virtualization, is the business can get the data today, and IT can go at their speed. They can carry on moving the data. They can look at new technologies, new efficiencies around cloud or whatever else. But the important thing is, today, if the business asks a question, they get access to the data.
Yeah. So I guess as we start to draw to a close, I'm going to put you on the spot for some top tips, because I think these are big chunky issues potentially, and you know, it pulls in multiple aspects of an organization, as we've said: technology, culture, mindset, so on. So how would you, what are the areas you see where actually this is something that works? We've tried this with multiple organizations. This will really get you going on this journey.
Yeah, and you know, I think the big thing is to recognize where that change is needed within that data of your organization. You know, and you know, just like where Spotify understood that change, and one of the, you know, the big things for us is that, you know, we can go and very, very quickly pilot, you know, an approach. We deliver Denodo on top of the cloud, all three main clouds, Azure, AWS, and GCP. And we've also automated that whole environment approach, which also follows all of the security requirements that you would have to go and get approved through all of the different service assessments. And, you know, I think, you know, as Lloyd will explain now, it's really getting going and then picking those 3 or 4 introductory data sources that you would like to go and access logically.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we'll more than happily provide our software. We're on G Cloud, but yeah, recognizing where that change is needed. The security layers are there. We want to be tested in the organizations, but I think also the performance is so probably the second one is around performance, isn't it, Blake?
Yeah, and I think performance is 2 things. I think one is where we've previously seen with, you know, a lot of organizations, it takes you months and months and months to go and set up a data warehouse. You know, we can set up Denodo environments in days, in weeks. Usually it's internal governance that's the main issue for setting these things, you know, a Denodo environment up in the cloud. And then, you know, the other aspect of performance is, the 2 other aspects of performance is the ease of integrating into your data sources. You know, there's a lot of out-of-the-box connectors that are available there, so it's very quick to go and integrate. And then, you know, thirdly, there's the performance. You can pull back very, very large data sets through a virtual platform and you know, and get access to it in real time.
But of course the top tip has to be come and talk to us, doesn't it? That's you know, that's how but we're on G Cloud. We're on G Cloud 12, G Cloud 13. You know, people like ONS, very sort of agile, fast approach to using Denodo, and you know, just a new way of looking at data. But equally, others are, you know, on that kind of vanguard.
Well, in the spirit of come talk to us, nice segue to flag, obviously, that the Government Data Summit is, you know, just days away really now. So anybody interested in this piece, I think they're going to have a pretty in-depth conversation with you guys on the day. Really looking forward to hosting the civil servants who are data focused, looking to build those bridges, both cultural and technical, between their departments. You know, if we can unlock the integration piece and start to share data and share insights, incredibly powerful opportunities to deliver not even improved services, conceived entirely new ways of delivering services for public sector. So incredibly powerful and important areas. So really grateful to you both for sharing your insights around this, and obviously looking forward to hosting you on the 20th of October at the Government Data Summit. Really good conversation. It's reminded me I need to go and check out my Spotify settings, amongst others. But yeah, just want to say thank you both, Blake and Lloyd, for joining us, being so open, sharing insights and sharing value, and look forward to seeing you soon.
No, thank you. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tim.
Yes.
So thanks again to Lloyd and Blake for joining me for that conversation. Love the Spotify, Apple Music analogy. It really helps to open up the topic of integration and data sharing for everybody. As we said, they're going to be hosting the discussion table at the Government Data Summit on the 20th of October, themed around interoperability and integration. Sure to be a popular topic, so if you're not already joining us, you can join by following the link in the show notes attached to this episode and join 150 DDAP peers and technology experts on the day at Church House in Westminster. That's about it for this episode, but we'll be back soon with another conversation with a public sector changemaker. But until then, goodbye.